welcome to another podcast. With us, we have Callum, who has arrived from the UK to attend the Polish Independence Day March. Welcome, Callum.
Thanks for having me.
What were your impressions of this crowd of, well, there are some controversies about the numbers, whether it was 40,000, 80 or 100, but we can probably agree that there was a lot of people out on the streets on November 11th in Warsaw.
So most people I don't think even know that you guys have a massive Independence Day march every year in Poland. And I only knew thanks to Visegrad, to be honest. You keep seeing it pop up in your timeline. These huge rallies of patriotic people with Polish flags. It's not something I really see in any other country in the way that you do it here. I mean, in the UK, it's kind of unthinkable that people would come out in that way. And not because it's a bad thing. It's glorious to see, especially in person. And if anyone's watching, I advise definitely come to Poland on Independence Day and see it for yourself. It's something to behold.
I can agree with you, as I was raised and brought up abroad, and when I came back to Poland around 10 years ago, that was when the Independence Day marches started, really. And there is a special electric atmosphere going on during those days. They really, because you have other patriotic events across the world, 4th of July, for example, in America, many Americans are out there waving their flags, but this isn't just that shallow flag-waving patriotism. The people that attend the Independence Day March, they usually have a quite coherent worldview, which is very conservative. So you have a lot of religious symbolism, for example, out in that marching, in that group of people out marching. You have chants that are very conservative. Could you feel that this is not, it's a quite political event after all?
I suppose it is. I mean, I think the reason it's so electric as well is probably because of Poland's history. I mean, regardless of how wonderful an American Independence Day rally would be, I imagine it would be, I haven't been to one, but because of Poland's history of resisting Nazism, resisting the communists, and just going through hell, frankly, through the 20th century, there's a very special atmosphere of we're still here. Poland is not yet lost, being the title of this year's one. I love that title. And so when you can see the people there, I mean, in the UK, usually right-wing political events, to be frank, are mostly just men, working age men as well. And in Poland, you go to that rally and there's an unbelievable amount of families, kids, etc., because everyone knows it's safe. Everyone knows that it's a good thing for your kids to grow up with as well.
What is interesting is that you absolutely have the families there, but it has to be said, you also have quite a lot of football hooligans, these small groups of young men that are, 20, 25 of them run around. And sometimes it can be seen that they are looking for some trouble. Fortunately, there has been no violence at the Independence Day March now for a good 7 or 8 years or so. But back in 10 years ago or so, there was some of it. So there is still this element that there is a little bit of adrenaline and people looking for this adrenaline kick. But you didn't see any incidents at this year's march.
None whatsoever. I mean, this speaks to the other aspect of it, as you rightly say, the political diversity you can see there. Because there are people there who are showing banners that are anti-abortion. There are people who are Christian nationalists or all kinds of things, Polish patriots. And then there's this group of like weird black bloc, the fascists who turn up. And I guess they're accepted because everyone's accepted. But just to remind people as well, they are utterly wiped out by the numbers of just normal Polish patriots who turn up. And as an event, I hope and I really plead that trend of the non-violence and the growing of this event continue, because it's a beautiful institution to have on your Independence Day, something so electric as this.
It's true. It does unite a lot of people. Unfortunately, not all of society, but on the center-right spectrum of politics, it really is that you have very different groups. There you have libertarians, you have people who support Ukraine, people who are against Ukraine. There, that plurality is truly big, and as you mentioned, there is that black bloc, so to say, around 100, 150. Some form of fascist-leaning movements, if not outright fascist. And as you mentioned, also there is no attempt to try to kick them out of the march, because that would probably end up in violence, and that is something that the organizers are trying to avoid. So basically, they let them march, but they don't really interact with them. They don't do anything with them, but they are also not trying to push them out. Instead, they are you can say they are doing their own little thing within the larger march. But
I wonder,
yeah.
is that more of a case of this is Polish Independence Day, everyone's welcome, rather than trying to avoid violence?
No, I think it is more about avoiding violence. That the cost of trying to push them out
Sure.
would be larger than just letting them stay. However, if Antifa, for example, would have shown up and would have tried to march in that march, then I'm pretty confident that they would have pushed them out.
Well, I'm wondering if you had, because it's kind of hard with Antifa. In my experience, they're never going to be patriotic.
No, I mean, they would never attend the march and march in it peacefully. They would be there to fight.
I mean, they may very well be, I don't know. If there are patriotic socialists or communists who turn up to the march, would they also be welcomed by the organizers as a sense of, okay, yeah, it's Polish Independence Day if you want to march with us? Or would that not be?
I think the organizers would probably be shocked. And they would be, well, this is actually a very good development, but probably the hammer and sickle you cannot parade with. You would have to take those flags down. But if you want to walk with us, then probably. These are naturally all speculations, but there is a certain sense that when Poland regained its independence 100 years ago, the father of modern Poland, Józef Piłsudski, was a former socialist activist, and today many would call him a terrorist. But there is some acceptance of a pre-war socialism that is patriotic in Poland, but the communists ruined it, and now any communist symbol or far-left symbol is viewed as a red sheet for a bull, so to say, for Polish nationalists. So it would be very difficult, that I'm sure of.
Yeah, I did see at the march, there are some guys who had, I love this just optically as well. You can see a massive flag that has the hammer and sickle crossed out, and then the swastika crossed out, and then occasionally you'll just see like Polish monarchy tick in the middle, of course.
Yes, these banners do appear from time to time. Usually it is in order to send a signal to foreign journalists, because when we were talking about this black bloc, I also saw this at this year's march, that when they come to the place where the march ends and they hold some speeches there, then the black bloc show up and they stand on a little hill right next to it. They fire off their flares, they start chanting, and immediately you see dozens of foreign journalists that run up to them and immediately start taking pictures of the most radical symbols that they can only find. And then we do know what the newspaper articles are going to look like in the coming days. So these other people, they're trying to counter it by showing that we might be conservative, we might even be nationalists, but we are definitely against fascism and any form of Nazism and so on.
Fair enough.
But do you think that a march like this could in any way be created in the UK? Would people march in something like this?
I think there's an appetite for it, especially as things are getting worse and worse with the situation in the UK. I do wonder what date they'd pick exactly. I was actually quite hopeful that, because I'd been to the march in Poland before Brexit happened, so the official Independence Day, as it was called, when we finally left the EU in 2019, I was really hoping that would become a tradition every year and we would have something like this in the UK. Sadly, it didn't work out because then COVID happened and whatnot.
Yes.
But if the political leadership and the right movement in the UK started doing this, I think it'd be a fantastic institution, just visually, if nothing else.
Yeah, the visual component is also important. It also shows, because many of these groups that participate, they aren't that visible for the rest of the year. They aren't really well represented in parliament and so on. So they take their chance of taking to the streets on that day and show everybody that we are here, but also showing other participants that look how many of us are here. Like, don't underestimate your capabilities. And I think in the UK, this is something that has been lacking, that you have a lot of these people that would be willing to march, but there is no organizer. There's nobody that has been able to create something like this so far. But maybe that is something that could change.
I mean, it's up to them. Let's see if they do it.
But if we look at the political system in the UK, you had, in connection with Brexit, you had a couple of new political parties that appeared. Initially, you had UKIP that did quite well for a while. I think they were polling at around 10% for some time. Then after that, you had the Brexit vote, but still it was difficult to leave the union it took a while, and Nigel Farage created the Brexit Party, which won the European Parliament election in the UK. But after Brexit actually happened, the Brexit Party disappeared. Is there a possibility that, because especially the Conservatives now are doing very poorly, could there be a new power that would emerge?
You would really expect one to already be there, frankly. The polling on this the data is pretty solid. There's a guy called Matthew Goodwinson who does great data on this, which is that you saw Boris Johnson, he hoovered up essentially the anti-EU, right-wing patriotic side of the UK all into his vote, along with the Red Wall, which is the old working class bloc. And that was a brilliant political revolution for him. And since his collapse and the disaster of everyone else after him, you would expect there to be a massive uptick in the next right-wing party, right? And Reform is what the Brexit Party is called now. And they're doing their thing. They're at a few percentage points in the polls, but they should be way higher if you're operating normal circumstances. And the data is that about a third of the people who voted for Boris Johnson now just don't vote. They're not interested because they feel utterly betrayed. And if Reform or anyone else had any sense, that's exactly what you need to tap into to start actually moving the UK political scene, if that's what you're interested in.
Yeah.
But the problem seems to be effective, charismatic leadership for the British right. And
what about Nigel himself, though? Because he still does a lot of media appearances, but it doesn't look like he's very interested in the political scene, more about media and maybe meta-politics at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of a joke about him, to be honest, which is that, all right, I'm retired, guys. This is the last time. I'm totally retired. And about 2 months later, he gets bored and then comes back in or runs a new party or something. So him at the moment, he officially, I think, just does media stuff, but he's kind of been flirting with the idea of becoming a member of the Conservative Party, and the Conservatives are desperate. So a lot of them are thinking, could we get him in to be the leader and save us from utter collapse? But at the same time, there's a lot of people who support him who hate that idea because it would be him betraying everything and getting in bed with the enemy, as they say.
And within the Conservative Party, there would certainly be circles that would vehemently oppose such an idea of taking him into the party.
They hate him too.
Yeah.
But it's up to him, really. I mean, it's a bit of a tragedy, actually, that the British right seems to be so put in this place of there's this cult of personality around Nigel Farage because of him being Mr. Brexit internationally and nationally. And so everything's in his court. Whatever he decides to do, I guess, will be the future of whichever circle can pick this up. But that's up to him. And that's a bit weird when he's decided he's retired. And then what happens to your movement?
Well, it does look like this is the only thing that could really shake up the system, so to say, ahead of the next general election, because as things are going right now, it doesn't look like there is any other profile within the Conservative Party that could take over from Rishi Sunak and bring some of that Boris populism back, so to say, and energize the people. Do you have any, maybe not hope, but rather do you think it's possible that there will be something that could lead to an uptick in support for the Conservative Party, or is basically Labour, have they already won the next election?
Labour's vote share haven't gone up. In fact, it's gone down in a few places, and yet they're still polling massively higher than the Conservatives. And as I say, that's because people have just checked out in the Conservatives. And I hope they die. They deserve to die, frankly, because they betrayed their core voter base. The Boris Revolution, in which he managed to unionize the working class and the patriotic South and so forth. I mean, one of the big issues of Brexit, for example, was the amount of immigration into the UK. This was the big issue. And what happened after he got into office? It spiked. And it spiked for the years since.
Yeah.
And in which case, you broke your major promise to the electorate, you deserve political death. That's how politics should work. And in which case, if they elected someone who then could turn that around, maybe, but who? And how could you even turn that around? I mean, they've got a series of months left, frankly, until whatever next election comes along. And there's no sign that they would even achieve any change in immigration, never mind actually want to do it, because they've said they wanted to do it for years. I mean, going back to the 1990-something manifesto, the Conservative Party said they wanted to reduce immigration. And yet, ever since then, when they've been in and out of power, it's increased. There's nothing for them but political death at this point. I don't know how on earth they'd bring it back.
Well, in that case, I think we can already congratulate Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Congratulations on your electoral victory. And hopefully the next time you're back after the election, you can tell us exactly how it went.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you for coming.